He was just a father, walking home from work. Then, sirens, handcuffs, a gavel slams. The real criminal, still free. What if the police ignored the truth and chose you instead? One moment, he was laughing with his kids. The next, he was branded a monster. Evidence screamed innocence, but nobody listened. An innocent man lost years. A family lost everything. But buried deep was a clue that refused to stay silent. He wasn't a man chasing riches. He was chasing time. Time with his wife. Time with his 2 young kids. Every morning, he kissed their foreheads before leaving for work. Lunchbox in hand. Coffee still warm. Just another face in the crowd. He worked long shifts at a small repair shop. Grease under his nails. Sweat on his back. But pride in every penny he brought home. Neighbors knew him as the man who'd help fix a car for free. The man who never raised his voice in anger. The man who believed honesty was enough. He dreamed of saving enough for his kids' college. A tiny house by the river. Family dinners without worry. But the world doesn't reward kindness. It punishes it. Bills piled up faster than his paychecks. His landlord's patience thinned. And whispers of corruption filled the town. Everyone knew the police worked differently here. Evidence mattered less than convenience. And sometimes, the innocent were easier to cage than the guilty. He ignored it, because trouble wasn't supposed to find him. Not a man who kept his head down. But small cracks were forming in the life he built. He noticed patrol cars circling his block more often. He noticed questions being asked about things he never touched. And he noticed the look in his wife's eyes. The quiet fear she couldn't hide anymore. Still, he kept faith. In God. In justice. In the idea that good men don't fall. What he didn't know was that his fate was already sealed. Signed, stamped, and waiting in a file he'd never seen. He was about to face a storm meant to break him. But storms don't always destroy. Sometimes, they forge. And his destiny was bigger than he ever imagined. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday. The air smelled of rain. He buttoned his shirt, kissed his wife, and promised he'd be home by dinner. At the shop, he fixed a broken starter for a neighbor's car. Laughed with a co-worker about the game last night. Life felt heavy, but normal. Then, shadows moved in. 2 police cruisers screeched to a stop outside. Doors slammed. Boots hit the pavement. And before he could wipe his hands clean, they were on him. Hands where we can see them. Confused, he obeyed. But confusion turned into horror when cold metal bit his wrists. "What is this about?" he begged. "The only answer, you know what you did." He didn't. But someone wanted the world to believe otherwise. Across town, a crime had shaken the neighborhood. A violent robbery. 1 victim in the hospital. 1 suspect described. Vague, blurred, forgettable. And somehow, his name was written on the police report. Not the man with a record. Not the man seen fleeing. Not the man the streets whispered about. No, him. The quiet father. The mechanic. The easy target. Neighbors gathered, whispering. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others avoided his eyes. Because when the police drag someone away, guilt sticks, even without proof. In the interrogation room, they pressed him. 4 hours. Accusing. Twisting. Threatening. Every word he spoke sounded weaker against their certainty. The media circled like vultures. A headline printed before the truth could breathe. Local mechanic arrested in brutal attack. His children saw it on the news. His wife's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, silent. Employers, silent. Justice, silent. He sat there, trembling. But beneath the fear, a spark lit inside him. Because he realized something chilling. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about closing the case. And he was their answer. By nightfall, the gavel dropped. Bail denied. Caged like an animal. The real suspect walked free under the same sky. And an innocent man stared at concrete walls. The system thought it had broken him. But deep inside, the fight had just begun. The case should have fallen apart in a single day. The evidence was thin. Too thin. The description from witnesses. A man taller. A man heavier. A man with tattoos he never had. But instead of clearing him, the police twisted it. Memories get fuzzy, they said. Maybe they misremembered. And so, Piece by piece, they rebuilt the crime around him. The wallet found near the scene, it wasn't his, but the chain of custody mysteriously lost the report. The fingerprints, none matched, but that didn't stop the prosecutor from standing before cameras, claiming forensic evidence was consistent. Consistent with what? They never said. Inside the interrogation room, they tried a darker tool. Coercion. Confess now, and maybe you'll see your kids again. Stay silent, and we'll bury you alive. He refused, tears in his eyes, but fire in his chest. Because he knew, signing his name meant killing the truth forever. The media, they chose a side. They always do. Motive found, screamed one headline. Mechanic's secret struggles, whispered another. Debt, bills, stress. Suddenly, his ordinary life became their painted motive, and the town was divided. Neighbors who once trusted him avoided his family. Some whispered, "No way he did this." Others muttered, "Why would the police lie?" Even his children felt the weight. Classmates pointed. Teachers avoided eye contact. The family's world shrank to silence and stares. Every day behind bars chipped away at him. The food tasteless, the nights endless, the dignity stolen. And yet, something inside refused to die. He began reading law books in the prison library. Page after page, learning the system that crushed him. Hope flickered. Maybe he could fight back. But just as he found strength, the darkness deepened. A key witness suddenly remembered seeing him near the scene. Another forgot their earlier statement that cleared him. It was too perfect, too rehearsed. He realized then, this wasn't just error. It was design. The villains weren't just the thief in the street. They were the ones wearing badges, the ones holding titles, the ones sworn to protect. Still, fate has a way of slipping clues into the cracks. Because in the mountain of lies, one detail refused to stay buried. A grainy security tape. Ignored, dismissed, nearly destroyed. But in that blurry footage, a shadow of a figure appeared. Broad shoulders, tattooed arms. The real suspect. The prosecution didn't want it seen. The police didn't want it found. But that detail, that sliver of truth, would one day change everything. For now, though, the innocent man remained trapped. Condemned by corruption. Carried by resolve. Because he knew something the world had forgotten. Lies can silence truth for a while. But not forever. The courtroom was a stage. Not for justice, but for spectacle. Reporters filled every bench. Cameras waited outside like wolves. And the jury, already poisoned by headlines. The prosecutor painted him as a monster. A man hiding rage behind a mechanic's smile. Every debt, every bill, every argument, twisted into motive. His lawyer fought back. But half the evidence was missing. The security footage, suppressed. The fingerprint report, lost in process. Each objection silenced with a judge's gavel. Witnesses shuffled in, one by one. Their words shaky, uncertain. Yet somehow, always bent to point at him. One contradicted the other. Timelines clashed. Details blurred. But in that courtroom, contradiction didn't matter. All that mattered was the story the state wanted told. And he sat there, watching it all collapse. His children's faces flashing in his mind. His wife gripping the pew, silent tears on her cheeks. He wanted to scream, to beg, to make someone, anyone, listen. But no one did. The gavel struck again. Order demanded. Silence enforced. The weight of the system pressed down like chains. And yet, through the despair, his spirit held. Because inside, he whispered the same words. Over and over, "I will not break." Outside the courtroom, his community fractured. Some turned away, unable to face the pain. Others stood quietly in support. Too few to shift the tide. The villains appeared to win. Every headline echoed their triumph. Every verdict seemed inevitable. Until a sound cut through the monotony. A witness hesitated. The courtroom froze. The prosecutor leaned forward, ready to pounce. But the words that followed shattered the silence like glass. I can't keep this inside anymore." Gasps rippled through the room. The prosecutor's face strained. And in that moment, for the first time, the cracks began to show. The truth, long buried, was clawing its way to the surface, and the battle for justice had only just begun. The jury filed back in, faces cold, eyes empty. He searched for hope in their silence, but hope was gone. Guilty. The word cut deeper than any blade. His wife gasped. His children wept quietly in the back row, and the gavel came down like thunder. Years stolen, freedom erased, a life reduced to chains. The prosecutor smiled. The police shook hands. Reporters sprinted outside to spread the story. Justice served. But justice was nowhere in that room. Only theater, only power, only lies. He stood there in shackles, humiliated before the world. Neighbors whispered. Former friends looked away. The weight of shame pressed down like stone. And yet, inside that crushing moment of despair, a strange strength rose in him. They had taken his freedom, but not his truth. They had silenced his voice, but not forever. Because even as the villains celebrated, a storm was building outside. Whispers grew louder. Journalists began to question. Some in the community asked, why did the evidence vanish? Why did the stories never match? Doubt began to spread. Outrage followed. The system thought the case was over. But cracks had already formed. And truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds air. He was led away, head bowed, but not broken. Because deep in his heart, he knew something the courtroom had forgotten. Injustice had won the battle, not the war. The cell door clanged shut, a sound meant to break him. A sound that echoed through his family's hearts. That night, his wife lay awake in an empty bed. His children cried into their pillows, asking when their father was coming home. And she had no answer. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Life outside moved on. But for them, time stopped. Bills piled up. The repair shop closed its doors. His children learned to live without the man who once tucked them in every night. Inside, despair gnawed at him. The food, the walls, the silence, all designed to crush his spirit. But still, he held on to the thought that truth was alive, even if buried. And beyond the prison walls, something unexpected began to stir. A young journalist dug deeper. She noticed the contradictions others ignored. Why had evidence vanished? Why had testimony shifted like sand? Community members started whispering too. At first in secret, then louder, then together. They held vigils, lit candles outside the courthouse, carried signs with one word, innocent. But with every voice raised, came a new danger. Anonymous threats, police intimidation, stories buried before they could print. Yet resistance didn't die. It grew. Because injustice is fuel. And the more the system tried to silence, the louder the truth became. From his cell, he heard faint rumors. Supporters chanting his name. Petitions spreading. Lawyers volunteering to reopen the case. For the first time, hope touched him again. Fragile. Dangerous. But real. He pressed his hands against the cold wall. And whispered a vow. They won't bury me here. Not forever. The villains believed the story was finished. That their victory was final. But beneath the surface, a new story was taking shape. One of courage. One of voices uniting. One of truth breaking through cracks of corruption. The hero was down. But the story wasn't over. His case wasn't just about one man. It was about a system. A machine built to punish the powerless and protect the powerful. Because when evidence can vanish, when lies can pass as fact, when convenience is chosen over truth, anyone can be next. He was not the first innocent man to fall. And heartbreakingly, he would not be the last. Ordinary people, crushed under the weight of false charges, false headlines, false justice. They exist in every town, every city. Most remain silent. Some never escape. But silence never lasts forever. His fight sparked something bigger. Neighbors who once stayed quiet now stood shoulder to shoulder. Strangers signed petitions, marched in streets, demanded reform. And slowly, the lies that seemed unshakable began to crack. Because truth is fragile. It bends under pressure. It hides in shadows. But it never dies. It waits for someone brave enough to lift it into the light. This story is not just about one man. It is about every family who prays for justice. every voice that refuses to be silenced, every soul who knows the system is broken, and days to fight anyway. One man carried the chains, but the weight of injustice belongs to us all. This story isn't just one hero. It's all of us. What if it were you? Your father, your brother, your child, branded guilty, shamed in public, crushed by a system that refused to listen. Would you stay silent, or would you fight back? This story is more than one man's tragedy. It's a warning, a call for change. Share this video, leave a comment, tell his story louder than the lies. Because silence is the ally of corruption. Justice survives only if ordinary people stand together.